Hi there, I'm going to be reading from Vaxis, Act 1 of the Unheavenly Creatures by Coheed and Cambria. Years ago, chaos cut through this atmosphere. The fractured worlds that inhabit this space were once locked in a force of uncontrollable destruction. Gravity was lost. Their planetary trajectories conjoined in one catastrophic collision, choking to remain viable even as the dying glow of their course peeked through the cracks and scars of those impactful moments. Yet a gas bears a sign of life, and the planets that many might have cast off as annihilated space continue to show a pulse across the hopelessness. These discarded Earths were very much still alive, and made profitable by the five houses of the Star Supremacy, an elite society who looked to the sky and saw potential in the nearly wasted planets. The opportunistic approach could hardly be considered an act of empathy for the human condition, as the decision to convert the dying planets into private prisons meant an unthinkable life sentence awaited those shipped off to their remote reaches. Here, the desolate and derelict burn away slowly, trapped in a race to death with the very ground they stand on. In this space between the well and the unknowing, our story starts there, into our future, yet far beyond our past, and a romance between a pair of unheavenly creatures. Weaving through the blacked-out space toward the freckling of cracked planets, a ship called the Gavel moved like a funeral procession. In many ways it was the end of life for the two prisoners being transported within its unmitigatable walls, to the most deplorable and prized of the doomed prison planets, known simply as the Dark Sentencer, an ominous highlight radiating through the military-grade windows of the Gavel. Nostrand looked on, presenting a poker face to the galaxy as the globe projected gold lines across his shackled arms and legs. His umber body dense as a slab of concrete, sinewy sheets of muscle visible beneath. He wore time well, if not mysteriously. His deep black eyes illuminated with youth, yet ancient from experience and miles away from the cold stare of the mountainous man restrained beside him. The owner of the stare, Otto, choked out a guttural cough, which rumbled through the metallic walls. His yellow teeth were exposed through the shredded, scarred flesh on one side of his mouth, setting the saliva from his cough free throughout the ship. The disgusted guards stared through their helmets, shaking their heads in revulsion at the monster as he shifted his weight in an effort to stretch his torso, exposing a shoddy tattoo on his chest of some long-dead prehistoric beast, an homage to his nickname, Colossus. One of the guards, Officer Matters, stood, his black mantle falling to the floor around him. Emblazoned on the sleeve was a symbol of a circle floating curiously below 3 points of a triangle, a reminder that the five houses of the Star Supremacy were at the helm of every decision made here. The HOSS was always watching. Officer Matters pushed a button on his suit, opening a large holoscreen, more for dramatic effect than functionality. "Wake up, fuckbags," he said. "Let's get through the formalities so that we can get you off this ship and into the shithole that you both earned yourselves." It's a regular fairy tale down there. He flicked his wrist to open the digital document. The screen lit up. Prisoner number 8641223, Nostrand Crane, also known as Creature. Prisoner number 6007586, Otto Kruger, also known as Colossus. You are hereby deemed wards of the Dark Sentencer. "We don't forget hanging, Judge," Otto said, his voice like gravel on stone. "What the hell did you say?" Officer Matters snapped. "They call me that too. You want to know why?" "I want to keep your fucking mouth shut whilst you're on my ship." 8 more guards rose dramatically as the officer got louder, their black SWAT gear tinged in red as the Gavel moved closer to the planet. Their helmets obscured their faces entirely, the shoulder and chest armor of their uniforms making them look more like vehicles than living beings. "Maybe later," Otto growled, smirking. Officer Matters shot him a look of disapproval. He was accustomed to dealing with challengers. He continued. "The rules governing your habitation are as follows. First ordinance, all inmates entering the Dark Sentencer shall be given 1 full day to check in with their supervising officer. During this time, he or she will be issued a gutter and assigned to a domicile. Failure to comply releases the inmate of any and all protections granted and deems the inmate a free agent of the planet, subject to the imprisonment of alternative gangs. Nostrum took note of the officer's thin lips, a nearly unrecognizable quiver in the top of his voice as he shouted, including that of the glass widow in the sublevels. Officer Matters glared at both of the prisoners. Questions? He asked. Nostrand and Otto remained silent, staring out into the abyss as the words scattered around them. They had hardly listened to what the officer said, tuning in and out the way one might when reading with the television on. Perfect. Let's not complicate this. Let's not complicate this. The words were a jolt through Nostrand's chest, lightning zipping through his bloodstream, travelling up and out of a labyrinth of veins, into the temporal lobe where he and Otto are sitting in a black, unmarked civilian hover vehicle years before they would ever board the gavel. They are dressed in full tactical gear, built by hand in the basement of an old warehouse long condemned. All around them, towering skyscrapers reach to the skies, the velvety coral and powder blue of the morning softening the edges of the city hammered out from steel and technology. Hovering vehicles zoom past, citizens frantic to make it on time to the white-walled offices. The city reverberates with a buzz of unrelenting obligation. But inside the frame of this parked Avia van, the status quo does not mean shit. A woman emerges from the back of the Avia van, shaking a strand of bright turquoise hair from out of her face, and she holds a computerized hand grenade out to Nostrand. Her lips are coated in pink gloss as she smirks, teasing him. She wears a patch over one, precisely, football-shaped eye. Remember, emergencies only, baby, she says. One last review, or are we all clear, guys? Otto looks annoyed. What? You think that this is my first rodeo, Naya? I don't need you or anyone questioning if I'm ready. You're not running this show. The words reach no one in particular, and Nostrand smiles back at Naya, pulling her in for a kiss. Otto sighs again, his exasperation louder than necessary. The two pull away, and Naya's pink gloss now shared a cotton candy crime scene across their lips. Knock 'em dead, kid, she whispers in Nostrand's ear before turning to face Otto. Come on, O. Put on your big boy pants and stop crying, she says, gently running her finger under her bottom lip to straighten the mess before pulling the strap of a 5.72 blaster over her head. Naya wiggles her shoulders, securing the strap across her back, gripping the enormous gun tightly to her chest. Now, let's go respectfully relieve Potts International of all its money, shall we? Nostrand pats Otto on the shoulder, encouragingly, wanting to reset the tone. After all, the trio are about to execute the biggest heist of their career. Otto ignores the gesture, silently putting on his mask. A metal plate wrapped with what looks to be burlap material, but could, just as logically, be dried flesh. The eye holes are hidden by a military-crafted pumice, porous enough to make the outside visible to the wearer, but impenetrable to nearly all hazards. Naya follows suit, strapping on her Pepto-pink mask, a carved-out silver heart in the center, and the spindly legs of a white spider painted over her right eye, appearing as a fringe of extra-long lashes. Nostrand is the last to place his mask, a strong believer that real fear comes from the familiar. His mask is simple and terrifying, painted yellow with blood-red lettering by Naya's steady hand, whether a dying man's last wish or a stark threat. The words were no less comforting to those who may read them with a last gasp of breath. Call your mother. The door of the Avia van slides open and the trio emerges in the ultraviolet daylight of the city of Marrakesh. The bank is bustling with morning activity and the revolving glass of the entry on an endless spin cycle as patrons enter and exit. The scene is so chaotic, in fact, that not a single soul notices when the three take their places across the busy lobby, and a single gunshot meets the ceiling. A symphony of collective gasps, a disorganized string section of isolated screams. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. You may have noticed you've chosen the wrong place at the wrong time this morning. Now, it's okay, we all make mistakes, but let's not try to make poor decisions a trend. The terrified sea of eyes lock on Nostrand as he speaks. Otto makes a beeline for the back of the bank toward the vault, pulling out what appears to be a digitized coding device. Can anyone think of an example of another bad fucking choice that you might make today? The eyes of the civilians dart across the room like a pool ball break, while the huddled bodies remain motionless. Nostrum twists at the torso, one hand held comically as he looks for an answer, while the other remains on the trigger of a gun. Anyone? Naya raises her hand. I know, she says, pointing to her head as if a thought had just popped into it. A bad decision would be calling the police, trying to be a hero, or interfering with us in any way. Nostrum smiles at her. Exactly right. Remember, Potts International is responsible for the safety of your money, and you are responsible for staying alive. So, sit back, take a few deep breaths. Nostrum gives Naya a nod and she sprints towards the back door, following Otto into the vault. Maybe close your eyes and get that 10 minutes of meditation in. Again, we're not interested in hurting any of you. The terrified eyes start to soften, almost imperceptibly as the crowd realizes they may make it out of this situation alive. A middle-aged mother with deep lines on her face sobs quietly, while one of the bank tellers, a young humanoid in a grey striped suit, shakes with anxiety, his scaled reptilian tail swishing on the floor in a nervous tick. Nostrum looks at the clock, a digital holographic numbers floating in a low table in the waiting area. A dozen clear ghost chairs sit around it, a red-headed patron crouched beneath one of them like a shield. His heavy breath condensing on the acrylic armrest. The minutes turn from 8 to 9. Muffled sounds and imperceptible action echo from the vault. Nostrum glances quickly behind himself to the front of the bank where nothing out of the ordinary seems to be happening. But his nerves are starting to show, peeking out with every movement of his brows. A shot ricochets down the hallway from within the vault, and Naya's cry crashes into Nostrum's ears as 3 more shots ring out. Nothing's making sense. Before he can process what's happening, Otto's turning the corner out of the vault, blood splattered across his mask, and a weighty bag slung over his shoulder. He approaches Nostrum, shouting jumbled words, the syllables not quite connecting. The fractured sounds like waves on a beach lapping just short of the shoreline. A security guard. I came from nowhere. Shot in the head. She's gone. Cops on the way. Go, 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 go. Dead. Nostrum instinctively turns for the safe, his body suddenly made of melting iron. He's aware that his weapons and armor seem to be suffocating him, but it hasn't quite occurred to him why. He removes the mask in a desperate attempt to get some air. The room is breathing. Waiting. The patrons of the bank grow anxious as Otto grabs Nostrum by the shoulders. What the fuck are you doing? Come on, put that shit back on. Are you hearing me? Otto tries to lock eyes with Nostrum, who struggles to catch his breath, gasping as he opens his mouth wider than he should to take in the air. She can't. Nostrum gasps, struggling to catch his breath. She can't be gone. I have to go get her. We can't just leave without. Naya's fucking dead and we are too if we don't get out now. The ring of a siren sounds, too close for comfort, but with enough distance to imply there may still be time. Nostrum's been dragged to the side door, an exit that opens into a barren alleyway behind the bank and adjacent row of buildings. His feet are cinder blocks, shattering the ground with every forced step away from the love of his life as she lies bleeding onto the cold tile of a bank vault floor. The bank patrons watch with hope. Could they make it out alive after all? The woo of the police sirens approaching, a response to their silent prayers. Otto pulls out the automated grenade from Nostrum's vest, tossing it in behind them with a warning to the waiting crowd. It detonates remotely. Be cool or your organs are going to be a finger painting in this lobby. Otto yells through the doorway, firmly placing his index finger to his lips. Nostrum starts to pull back into the bank, shaking Otto's grip. but Otto cuts him off, holding the detonator up to Nostrum's face. "Don't test me," he screams, losing his patience. "Get out of the door or they die. I am not fucking around." Nostrum is too stunned to navigate this threat. He trudges through the alley, not noticing when he accidentally lets his mask fall to the ground. His expression flat, mouth stiff, lids frozen open. It's the silence before the bomb drops. Then a clap, a sustained roar as feeling billows back into him. He turns to Otto as the pair begin to run down the glassy black pavement toward an orange two-door ground vehicle parked near a dumpster, Otto dragging him with each step. It's an older model and a bit rusted around the door frames. What if she's alive back there, man? What then? I saw it with my own eyes. People die. You lose her now or you lose her in 50 years. That's just the way life goes. Otto jostles the money-filled bag over his shoulders, nodding his head toward it. This is the only constant. Not for me. I've got to go back. Nostrand is stammering, sliding over words and emotion and decisions that are making themselves as the seconds tick by. A silver-haired lady with oversized alien eyes taps her way out of an adjacent building. Perhaps an insurance company or some other kind of business built upon capitalizing on the world's anxiety, in a pair of brand new heels. They were a gift from a man she had recently started sleeping with, and she found herself getting lost in the delicate clacking that they made as she walked. She pushes the automatic door button to a not-so-new vehicle without looking up. Lost in newfangled passion and expensive footwear, both beyond anything that she'd come to expect in her life. It was both beautiful and a crying shame, because if she had only glanced up, she would have seen the beast of a man with a sack of cash and a gun. Instead, Colossus's arms are on her in an instant, with a gun in her abdomen. "Don't you dare go back, creature. Get in this car, or this one will be on your hands too." Nostrum looked up at her, in shock. "Why are you involving innocent people in this? Let her go. You don't have to go back with me. You don't get your ass in now, and I will kill as many people as I can until I get caught," Otto says, the lady trembling beneath the barrel of a gun. "It's your choice." The last few hours have proven to be more than Nostrum can handle, even though he's staring at a man who's been the closest thing he has had to a friend for the majority of his adult life, and in that moment he never felt more vitriol towards a human, living being. A temper crow flies onto the hood of the orange vehicle, oblivious to the vicious tension in the air as it begins to preen its charcoal tail feather. Nostrum studies the way the black plumes appear one-dimensional, until viewed from another perspective. Given a slight angle, one tiny shift, the feathers catch the light radiating an opalescence previously unnoticed. There is life in everything. He turns back towards the bank, then he walks to the vehicle, gets inside and closes his eyes to forget. But Nostrum could never forget. Hey! Not even now as he opened them years later, shackled inside the gavel, beside the one who forced his hand that day. Hey! If I were you, I'd be paying attention to what's about to happen when your ass hits the ground down there, not zoning out like some kind of space cadet whilst I'm asking if you have any questions, said Officer Matters, smacking Nostrum in the face with the back of his hand. Outside, the dark sentencer was almost below them, burning and welcoming them into its fading arms. Otto let out an incredulous laugh. The man who can't stop himself from putting his nose into things that are none of his business. And now he's got nothing to ask. She was my business. You wasted your damn life trying to make her dying the folks of it. Otto struggled against his confines as his temper rose. And it wasn't good enough to sacrifice your own freedom, he growled. You decided to take mine, too. If you hadn't gone snooping around, we could have stayed underground. I'd be living large and left the fuck alone. We both know that they were hunting us after that muffled up job, but you just couldn't let it go. Officer Matters and the surrounding guards stood at attention. The smallest of them pulled out an electrified club from the back of his uniform. Let it go! She had no one but me, Otto, Nostrand shouted. I was the only one who gave a shit about her, and I couldn't even bury her. None of that made any sense. It still doesn't. No news headlines about finding her dead. Or alive, for that matter, in the bank. How did you expect me to just stay out of sight and live out the rest of my days without knowing? Because I do, Otto said. He took in a slippery breath, and one could nearly see the thought taking shape in his mind, the words ricocheting around his brain like bullets ready to shoot fast from his throat. Otto's brow shifted into a deep V, his eyes hollowed and lit with an ugliness so authentic it could almost pass as pure. Locked and loaded. And you want to know how I know? Nostrand. Otto breathed. He leaned in as much as his chains would allow, and with a whisper took the first shot. Because I killed her myself. It's not every day that a person's faced with a betrayal that crosses so many well-defined lines. It's certainly not commonplace to listen in to a conversation that includes a confession to murder. But working on a prison transport vehicle like the Gavel was far from the average career choice, and, as it happened, the guards on board had been privy to intimate confessions of all kinds. Officer Matters knew nothing good ever came from a bombshell like this aboard his ship, and he wasn't willing to wait and see what kind of fresh hell was about to unfold as these two dangerous and criminally insane inmates prepared to digest this admission. So, without wasting any time, he promptly pushed the eject button on the holding devices. He didn't give so much of a parting glance. As their shackles released and prisoner 86412223 and 6007586 dropped out of his sight into the air below. The fall from the Gavel was nearly frictionless. The two men glided through the ebony aurora of the open space as they tried with futility toward one another, desperate to make angry contact with a limb or a face. The fury grew in their attempts to gain control as their own bodies proved useless. It was by the hand of the universe alone that Nostrand was able to grab a hold of Otto's pant leg, pulling his way up to look him into the eyes. Without gravity, there could be no fight. So Nostrand did all he could. He reached up towards Otto's trunk-sized neck and squeezed as hard as his hands would manage. The hands that Naya had always joked were made for sports, not crime. The hands that he wished had held her when she breathed her last gasp. The hands that were now desperate to shatter an old friend's windpipe. For a moment it seemed as if Otto had given in. He didn't fight back. His arms floated dreamily at his sides, the stance of a man gifting revenge to his ailing friend. Then, without warning, as was his way, Otto grabbed Nostrand by the throat with the heaviness of a butcher. They remained locked here, sinking as one, but never further apart in spirit. It's hard to say who lost consciousness first, but as their hands unfurled, they began to drift apart again. The pull of the planet's vacuum distribution system separated them, sucking the men into tangerine incandescence.